What if, for a second, your reflection simply decided not to follow you? Would you notice immediately? Imagine the scene. You're alone, silent, looking in the mirror as you've done thousands of times before. Everything seems perfectly normal. Your face, your breathing, your eyes fixed there, staring back at you. But then, something tiny happens. So subtle you almost ignore it. A delay, a microsecond out of sync. You blink, and the reflection blinks afterward. Have you ever experienced this? That strange feeling that something is out of place but you can't quite explain what it is. As if reality has malfunctioned slightly, an invisible glitch that only you have noticed. Now think about this. What if it wasn't just my imagination? What you're about to discover might surprise you, because this type of situation goes far beyond a simple optical illusion. Within mysterious and psychological animated stories, this is one of the most disturbing concepts that exist, the moment when reality ceases to be reliable. The moment when something as basic as your own reflection begins to behave independently. And that's where the real discomfort begins. You raise your hand slowly. Observing each movement, the reflex follows. Everything's fine. You try again, a little faster. It's still synchronized. Then you stop, you stare in silence, waiting, and for a moment it seems to move before you do. Strange, isn't it? Stay with me until the end, because what seems like just a small flaw could be the beginning of something much bigger. Something that messes with the idea of broken time, of paradoxes, of a reality that no longer follows the rules you've always believed in. In many digital entertainment narratives, especially in 2D animations with a psychological slant, the reflection is used as an extension of identity. It should be you, always, without question, without delay, without error. But when this pattern breaks, the question ceases to be what is happening, and becomes who is in control. And perhaps the most unsettling part isn't the reflection itself, but the doubt that arises afterward. Because when you start questioning something as basic as a mirror, everything else starts to seem unstable too. The environment, time, your own perception. As if reality had tiny cracks that were always there, just waiting for you to notice. Have you ever felt that way? That feeling that the world around you isn't quite running right? Like a subtle error, an imperceptible delay, a detail out of place that shouldn't be there. Now imagine that feeling growing, repeating itself, becoming impossible to ignore. Because sometimes the problem isn't what you see, it's what sees you back. And it is precisely at this point where normalcy begins to fail and discomfort takes over, that the story truly begins to unfold. And the more you observe, the harder it becomes to ignore. Because it's not just about the mirror. It's about that growing feeling that something is slightly out of sync with the reality you've always known. As if there's an invisible delay between you and the world. As if time is no longer flowing continuously, but rather in small, imperfect cuts, almost like a glitch that insists on repeating itself. And perhaps the most unsettling thing is this. Doubt begins to creep in silently. First, you question the reflection. Then, you question your perception. And when you realize it, you're no longer sure which version is really in control. Now, tell me, if this happened to you, would you trust what you're seeing? If this topic resonates with you, or if at any point in your life you've felt something similar, even if just for a second, leave a comment below, describing what has resonated with you the most so far. Sometimes, what seems strange to one person might be exactly what someone else has also experienced but never been able to explain. And it's in these exchanges that we begin to realize that perhaps we're not so alone in these feelings after all. And if you enjoy this kind of mind-bending story, one that plays with paradoxes, broken time, and those flaws in reality that make everything more unsettling, leave a like. It may seem simple, but it really helps the video reach more people who also enjoy this type of content, people who might be looking for exactly the feeling you're experiencing right now. And if you want to continue exploring these ideas, delving into psychological animations, unsettling theories, and stories that challenge what is real, subscribe to the channel, because when you do, you not only keep up with future videos, but you also show that this type of content needs to continue to exist. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this type of message. And ultimately, that's what transforms a simple video into a shared experience. Because the more we talk about these things, the more they cease to be just imagination and begin to seem a little closer to reality. And perhaps that's exactly where things start to get even stranger. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because what seemed like just a strange detail begins to take shape within the most ordinary routine possible. The character wakes up, follows their habits, brushes their teeth, passes by the bathroom mirror without paying much attention. And for a few seconds, everything seems absolutely normal. This is the most dangerous point, when nothing seems out of place. But little by little, almost as if behind the scenes of a reality that is transforming, small deviations begin to emerge. It's not something blatant, it's subtle. A minimal delay in movement, a look that seems to linger too long, a gesture that doesn't quite fit. And the more he ignores it, the more these details insist on returning, as if there were a hidden truth trying to reveal itself. The mind enters into conflict, because accepting that would mean questioning everything. Perception, memory, decisions. Did he really see that? Or is he creating a narrative for something he doesn't understand? That's the trap. When doubt begins, it doesn't stop. It expands, takes up space, alters the way you interpret every little event, and then comes the real impact. It's no longer just about the mirror, it's about the breakdown of trust in one's own reality. Every reflection becomes a test, every movement, a confirmation, every second an attempt to maintain control over something that seems to be slipping away. There's a transformation happening there, silent, almost imperceptible, but inevitable. And the more he tries to return to normal, the more normal ceases to exist. As if reality were being rewritten in real time, without warning, without logic, without explanation. And perhaps the most disturbing thing is realizing that this doesn't start with big events. It starts like this. Small, discreet, almost negligible. Comment below. This makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because there comes a point when you can no longer pretend it's just your imagination. What once seemed like an isolated detail begins to repeat itself with unsettling frequency, as if following an invisible pattern. The character stops, observes, breathes more slowly, and decides to test it. He raises his hand slowly, this time paying attention to every millimeter of the movement. The reflex follows. Everything's fine, but it's not enough. He does it again, faster then slower, and then something fails. A slight delay, almost imperceptible but real. And it's at that moment that everything changes. Because from this point on, it's no longer about doubt. It's about confirmation. The mind tries to react, to seek logic, to find an explanation that keeps the stability of reality intact. But the more it tests, the more evident it becomes that something is out of place. And this has a direct impact on its mentality. The way it interprets the world begins to transform. Every reflex becomes a potential error, every movement a potential break, and something even deeper is happening behind the scenes of this experience. The feeling of control begins to slip. Because if something as basic as a reflex can fail, what else could be compromised? Decisions, the perception of time, one's own identity. That's the real turning point. It's not the moment the reflection fails. It's the moment it realizes it failed. And when that awareness arrives, it brings with it a series of revelations that are difficult to ignore, as if a hidden truth were beginning to emerge, layer by layer, testing how much he can handle without completely losing his balance. The most curious thing is that, even in the face of the evidence, a part of him still resists. He still tries to fit it into some rational explanation. But another part has already understood that it's no longer a matter of logic. And that's exactly where the tension really starts to build. Comment below. I noticed that. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because once perception changes, there's no going back to the starting point. What was once a simple delay begins to evolve, almost as if reality itself were undergoing a silent transformation. The reflection no longer only errs in timing, it begins to err in intention. The character watches, motionless, trying to control his own breathing, and then it happens again. He's not smiling, but the reflection is a slight, subtle movement, but completely out of context. This is no longer a common glitch, it's a pattern break. It's as if a decision is happening on the other side. And that's where the psychological impact intensifies, because it's not just about seeing something strange. It's about feeling that something is reacting, something that you shouldn't have control over, but now seems to. The mind enters a state of constant alert, trying to understand if it's an external malfunction or an internal manifestation. Behind the scenes of this experience, logic begins to give way to something more instinctive, a raw feeling, difficult to explain, that says this is not safe, that this shouldn't be happening. And yet it is. Each new movement becomes a test, each second a weight. And the more he observes, the more the reflex's behavior deviates from what he expected. A gaze that lingers too long, a slight tilt of the head out of sync. Small revelations that, added together, create a rupture impossible to ignore. The hidden truth begins to take shape, not as a clear explanation, but as a presence. Something that exists there, in that space between him and the mirror, as if waiting for the right moment to fully manifest itself. And what's most disturbing is realizing that maybe this isn't just happening, maybe it's evolving. Write this down. This is not normal now. I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because when reality starts to fail like this, the first reaction isn't fear, it's a desperate attempt to explain. The character forces their own mentality to find a logical way out, something that keeps everything within a safe territory. Exhaustion, stress, optical illusion. They repeat these possibilities as if they were a shield, as if naming the problem were enough to neutralize the impact. But it isn't, because, behind the scenes of this experience, a silent struggle is taking place. On one side, reason tries to organize the chaos. On the other, there's a growing feeling that there's a hidden truth that can no longer be ignored. And the more he insists on rationalizing, the more events seem to intensify, almost as if reality itself reacts to this denial. He looks away from the mirror for a few seconds, takes a deep breath, tries to compose himself. Maybe it's just a phase. Maybe his mind is playing tricks on him, but when he looks back, there it is again. The reflection, waiting, motionless for a second longer than it should be. And that changes everything because it's no longer a random sequence of failures. It starts to look like a response, a reaction. as if there were an intention behind it. And this perception has a direct impact on his decisions to run away, to ignore, to confront. Each choice carries a different weight. Now, the journey ceases to be external and becomes internal. It's no longer about what's happening in the mirror. It's about what's happening inside. Doubt, fear, curiosity, all mixed together, creating a tension that's difficult to sustain. And amidst all of this, a question begins to gain traction. And it's not an easy one to face. What if it's not reality that's wrong, but the way he's always perceived it? Comment below. I would try to explain as well. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because there's a point where the attempt to understand simply breaks down. No matter how many explanations he constructs, how many justifications he tries to fit in, something changes definitively. The reflection ceases to be an answer and becomes a presence. The character stares at the mirror once more, already expecting some kind of mistake, some slight delay. But what happens now is different. He moves and the reflection doesn't follow. There is no delay, there is no progressive failure. There is a complete rupture, and at that moment, time seems to stand still. The reflection remains motionless for another second, then, slowly, moves on its own. A simple gesture but full of intention, a slight tilt of the head, a direct, firm gaze, as if finally recognizing who is on the other side. This is the turning point, because now there is no more room for doubt or denial. Reality, as he knew it, has just been rewritten, and the impact of this goes far beyond fear. It's a profound shift in mindset, a transformation that strikes at the very foundation of everything: identity, control, perception. Behind the scenes of this scene, a new dynamic begins to emerge. It's no longer him observing the reflection. It's as if the reflection is also analyzing, making decisions, evaluating each reaction. There's a silent exchange happening, a kind of game where the rules haven't been explained. And perhaps the most unsettling part isn't the movement itself, but the feeling that it was destined to happen. As if each small previous mistake was just preparation, a sequence of signs leading precisely to this moment. The hidden truth is no longer hidden. It's right there, staring you back in the face. And when two glances meet with different intentions, something inevitable begins to take shape. Write this down. Now it's getting serious. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because after this moment, the question is no longer what is happening, but rather who is really in the right place. The character continues to stare at the reflection, trying to regain some kind of control. But something inside him has already realized there is an inversion happening. And it's not just visual. The reflex seems more stable, firmer, more certain. Meanwhile, the character begins to feel the opposite, a slight slowness in his own movements, a hesitation that didn't exist before, as if, somehow, the roles were adjusting without asking permission. It's a difficult feeling to accept, because it challenges everything he's ever believed. But behind the scenes of this experiment, a new logic begins to form. What if the error was never in the reflection? What if, from the beginning, he was observing from the inverted side of reality? This idea doesn't come as a clear explanation. It arrives as an unsettling revelation. A hidden truth that can't be proven with arguments but with feeling, with impact. With that growing perception that something no longer fits as it once did. The reflection, now, doesn't seem confused. It doesn't seem unstable. On the contrary, it observes with a kind of silent certainty, as if it knew something the character is still trying to understand. And that completely changes the dynamic, because when one side demonstrates confidence, and the other begins to doubt itself, the balance inevitably tips. The journey, which was initially about investigating an external error, transforms into something much deeper, an internal crisis where identity and perception begin to merge. Simple decisions take on enormous weight. Trusting oneself is no longer automatic. And amidst all of this, an idea begins to take shape, not as a theory, but as a real possibility. What if the reflection isn't wrong, and is simply occupying the place that has always been its own? Comment below. What if it's the other way around? Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because when this doubt truly takes hold, confrontation ceases to be inevitable and becomes necessary. The character can no longer simply observe. There is an internal, almost instinctive pressure that pushes them to act, to test how far things will go. And it is at this point that two versions truly begin to clash. He moves, but now it's no longer a curious test. It's an attempt to assert control, to prove something, but the reflection responds differently. Not like a mirror, but like someone who is also making decisions. The movements cease to be synchronized and become opposite. When one advances, the other retreats. When one hesitates, the other reacts firmly. And this has a direct impact on his mindset. Because for the first time there is resistance. It's no longer a passive failure, it's an active confrontation. As if two consciousnesses were vying for the same space, each trying to validate its own version of reality. Behind the scenes of this scene, something even deeper begins to happen. The perception of identity begins to fragment. Who is right? Who is in control? And perhaps the most difficult question, who started all this? Every decision now carries an unpredictable consequence. Approaching the mirror no longer seems safe, but retreating doesn't solve anything either. There's a constant tension, a pent-up energy that seems poised to break through any remaining boundary separating the two sides. And the reflection. He shows no fear, On the contrary, there is a firmness, an almost unsettling clarity in the way he positions himself, as if he already knew the outcome of this journey even before it reached its climax. And when two sides come into conflict, only one can maintain its own version of the truth. Write this down. Who is the original? Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because when that limit is finally broken, there is no turning back. The confrontation ceases to be merely visual, ceases to be psychological, and becomes physical, real, inevitable. The character, driven by a mixture of impulse and despair, approaches the mirror as if that were the only possible decision within this entire journey. And then it happens. There is no warning. There is no preparation. The reflex moves first, a quick, precise gesture. And, for an instant, everything loses its logic. The surface of the mirror, which should be solid, begins to distort as if it were liquid. The image fragments, repeats itself, overlaps. It's as if broken time were collapsing in on itself, creating multiple versions of the same moment, all happening at the same time. The impact is immediate. Perception dissolves. Space no longer seems reliable. The very notion of inside and outside ceases to make sense. Behind the scenes of this scene, reality undergoes a complete transformation, as if it were being rewritten frame by frame, without following any known rules. The character tries to react, but his movements seem delayed, disconnected, while the reflection now moves with clarity, with intention, as if it were finally operating within a system it masters. And in this chaos of images, sounds, and distortions, an even more unsettling revelation emerges. Perhaps this moment is not a mistake, but the result of everything that came before. Every glitch, every flaw, every small break, leading precisely to this point. A final decision without words. A moment where separation no longer exists. And when reality reaches this level of rupture, what remains is not a clear answer. It's a new way of existing. Comment below. Everything broke. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because after the breakdown, what remains isn't the visible chaos, it's the strange silence that follows. As if everything had been restarted, but not exactly the way it was before. The scene stabilizes, the noises disappear, the image returns to normal. Or at least, it seems to return. Someone enters the room, light footsteps, ordinary routine, no awareness of what happened there seconds before. The mirror is in the same place, intact, immobile, reflecting everything as it should, and for a moment nothing catches the eye. But that's the key detail. A person walks past a mirror without looking directly, just glancing at it, and for a microsecond the reflection doesn't follow. An almost invisible delay. Too quick to be perceived rationally, but enough to cause that uncomfortable feeling, difficult to explain. Behind the scenes of this new reality, something remains active, not as an obvious mistake, but as a subtle presence, a mark left by the transformation that happened before, as if the system had been altered but continued to function within new parameters, new rules that no one explained. And that changes everything, because the impact is no longer in the event itself, but in the repetition, in the possibility that it wasn't a one-off, that it could happen again at any time to anyone. Without warning, the hidden truth no longer tries to conceal itself, it simply waits, silently observing as part of a journey that continues even when it seems to have ended. And perhaps the most disturbing thing is precisely that. The feeling that, even when everything seems normal, something is still out of place. Comment below. I felt that, and in the midst of all this, if you've made it this far, you've already realized that this wasn't just a story about a strange reflection. It was an experience about perception, about mindset, about those little cracks that sometimes appear in reality and make us question things that always seemed right. If this type of content resonates with you, if this journey has captivated you in some way, subscribing to the channel is simply a way to continue exploring these ideas together. Because there's still so much to explore beyond what seems obvious, and each video delves a little deeper into that line between reality and what we think is reality. And if at any point in this story you felt that discomfort, that curiosity, or even that silent identification, leave a like, not as an obligation, but as a sign that this connection truly happened here. Now, one thing I like to know, write in the comments, I stayed until the end. It's simple, but it shows that you lived this experience until the very last second, and that says a lot. And if that feeling is still lingering in your mind, there's a video right here that continues along those same lines, further expanding on this idea of reality, perception, and things that don't quite fit together. Click on it and continue watching.